Welcome back, everybody. It's day 2 of this year's Read a Book Every Day challenge. And yesterday's book was Burning Daylight by Emily McIntire. So I'm going to come on here and tell you my thoughts. I am going to ask you to cast your mind back to yesterday. If you haven't watched that video, what are you doing just jumping into this playlist at a random point? Go watch day 1. But I did say that Soul Searching was so good as a day 1 book that I was concerned that other books would suffer in comparison. Which leads me on to day 2. And I'm going to come out and say it. One of the things that I don't love about doing this challenge is that as a content creator, I would prefer not to post about a book if my thoughts on it are not positive. You know, I want to be coming online and championing the great books. You know, I read quantity, so I can recommend quality, and so I tend to mainly come online and talk about the books that I loved. And as an author, I love Emily McIntire. I am an Emily McIntire ride or die. My first 3 Never After books are the indie published versions because I was buying Emily McIntire books before she got trad published, team. So I will admit I kind of set myself up for failure because I had very high expectations of what this book was going to be like. The best bit of advice I can give you if you are going to pick up Burning Daylight and start this new Emily McIntire series is please, please, please go and read Emily McIntire's Sugarlake series, because I think you are setting yourself up for failure for sure if you have only read and are only familiar with her Never After series before reading this. Emily even came out and said, you know, this is like kind of a mix of the two, and I'm going to tell you on the sliding scale from the Sugarlake series to the Never After series, this sits more towards the Sugarlake series side of the spectrum. I'm sure you're wondering, what do I mean by that? Well, Emily's Sugarlake series were written before she was writing the Never After series, blew up, became this online sensation, and has gone through, you know, what she has gone through in the last few years. And they are good. I'm not going to say they're in any way bad. Emily McIntire doesn't write bad books. She's not a bad author, but she came into her stride in the final Sugarlake series book and then ran the gamut with her Never After series. Right, Emily McIntire writes freaky best. When she lets herself be weird and freaky and dark and twisted, that is what made me fall in love with her. That's what makes most people fall in love with Emily McIntire, right? They read the dark stuff and they're like, yes! For so many people, she will be their introduction to dark romance. When people ask me, oh, I'm kind of interested in dark romance, but I have no idea where to start, I directly point to Emily McIntire's Never After series and I say, hey, this is like a good smorgasbord. It's like a charcuterie platter of different dark romance nibbles, and you can read your way through them and see what you like and then find more of it. Her Sugarlake series is a different kettle of fish. Books 1 to 3, I would give 3 stars to. I read a lot of vanilla contemporary romance, and they are fine vanilla contemporary romances. The 4th book in that series gets a 5-star, but that's because we start getting a little bit, you know, kinky. And I love that. It's like she got a taste for it in that final Sugarlake series book and then just went bananas with Never After. And I love that. Pin your freak flag to the wall. Balls to the wall. Crazy, dark, edgy, unique. I love that about the Never After series. On that note, Burning Daylight is a return to a more Sugarlake series style of writing. I'm going to tell you now, if you have gotten into Emily McIntire because you like dark romance, this is not that. This is a contemporary retelling of Romeo and Juliet, which I have to say, that's always a toughie. I can put my hands up and say I have a very canonical English literature degree. I read English literature at St Chad's College, Durham, and I had an entire module at university that was just Shakespeare. I went and saw Ian McKellen when he was doing his tour around the UK, and he had a bit in his performance where he asked everyone in the audience to shout out the name of a Shakespeare play, and he would show off the fact that he knew lines from every single bit of Shakespeare's canon because he was a member of the RSC. And so people would shout out a play and he would recite a little bit of it, and it was truly phenomenal. But my friend and I are sat there in the audience, and you do the big uns first, right? The ones the audience actually knows. And then you start losing momentum, and you have to start getting into the niche ones. And I got a genuine reaction from Ian McKellen of, wow, no one's ever shouted that before, because I know Shakespeare's canon very, very well. And I'm a fan of a good Shakespearean retelling. But I think there are reasons that some are more successful than others. Some stories are simply easier to translate into the modern lexicon than others. For example, Taming of the Shrew, one of my favourites, and Much Ado About Nothing, okay? They have some of Shakespeare's best female characters, and they have been translated into modern contexts successfully over and over again. Whether that's film, whether that's books, and specifically in books, you know, Chloe Liese, Nisha Sharma, they have written fantastic, spicy Shakespearean retellings. They have entire series based on recontextualizing these very, very familiar stories. But I do not think Romeo and Juliet is an easy one for anyone to translate successfully. It is hard to get right. In fact, I don't think there are many that I can just whip out off the top of my head in terms of like Shakespearean retellings of Romeo and Juliet that I think slap. Whereas I can with others. I can give plenty of examples of successful retellings. Romeo and Juliet, not that many. And so I think Emily set herself up for a bit of a tough time, okay? This is the most famous Shakespeare play, and it's hard to take a tragedy and write a happy ever after romance, okay? Because there are 4 deaths in Romeo and Juliet that are all incredibly important to not just the narrative, but also to the emotional beats of the story. And Emily starts this book off by letting you know at the very beginning that this is going to be a happily ever after. So you know the translations of Romeo and Juliet, Roman and Juliet in this book, they're going to make it, right? And they're going to end up happily ever after, which is normally one of the things I love about reading a romance book. But this is a translation of a tragedy, and them dying at the end is kind of the big gut punch. So you know that's being pulled away. You need something else with similar level impact to replace it with. But before Romeo and Juliet die at the end of the play, you have 2 other characters, and we're going to get massively into spoiler territory here, specifically for this book, okay? I think we're past the point where I can spoil Romeo and Juliet for people. Like, if you're going, oh no, spoiler alert for Shakespeare's play, it's hundreds of years old, right? That's ridiculous. But in Romeo and Juliet, 2 other characters die, and it's very, very important, okay? Mercutio, my baby, okay? I love him. He is actually my favourite character in Romeo and Juliet, okay? Him dying, tragic, tragedy. And then you have Tybalt, okay? So both Romeo and Juliet lose people they care about. The conflict is real. The stakes are high. So in this modern translation, instead of, you know, a sword fight, you know, people are probably gonna get shot. Okay? That's gonna be the modern equivalent. How did we get to the end of this book without any of the 4 people who are meant to die in Romeo and Juliet dying? Okay? And it is very rare that I am gonna come online and say, there wasn't enough death in this for me. But I think when you take away even the possibility of those kinds of stakes, it undermines a lot of the tension. It undermines a lot of the weight of what's going on. By the end of this book, I was like, wow, that's amazing. No one died. That's not true. So someone does die. But I don't want to spoil everything, okay? I still think you should read this book. Like, it's not a bad book. I just don't think it's a good Shakespearean retelling. I also think this book suffers from the fact that it's doing a lot. Like, there's a lot going on in terms of the world building, in terms of setting up stuff for loads of subsequent books, and yet simultaneously doesn't do a lot at all. It was surprisingly straightforward for a book this size, and for a space and a narrative and an entirely new world that, you know, it is pretty sizable. That there is that real juxtaposition there of sort of overly simple with also overly complex. Sorry guys, my phone did not like that. My phone packed in at that point didn't alert me, so I carried on talking for another 15 minutes, found that the phone had packed in, had a little scream, and have already gone to re-record twice and the phone is not having any of it, so we'll see how much we get left. We'll see how much of the rest of this video we can actually record. One thing I wanted to say about Burning Daylight, which I just hope the phone lets me actually record for once, is that I think this narrative as a whole struggles with the fact that Emily is setting up a lot of other stuff in this book, and those little tidbits, those little scenes that are clearly signposting a future narrative, a future romance between characters, they were so clear that I found myself getting a bit distracted by them. Like, I'll be honest, even in the source material, Romeo and Juliet, they're not the most interesting people, right? And, you know, I then think Emily suffers with the fact that, you know, Roman and Juliet, they are direct translations of those two very vanilla, very boring characters. And so when another couple come along, or more than a couple, as it may be, your heads turn. You're distracted away from that core romance, that narrative. And I'm sure it's just meant to be there as signposting, as signalling. But because there's not enough weight, there's not enough heat, there's not enough going on with your core romance, I genuinely felt myself getting distracted. And I'm not gonna lie, I am a little bit nervous to see where Emily goes with Art, Genevieve, and Lance. Just because, funnily enough, on a similar theme to what I've already said, I did an entire module at university on the literature of romance and chivalry, so I am super familiar with Le Morte d'Arthur, and it does in fact have a brilliant contemporary retelling already in Sierra Simone's American Queen trilogy, in which we get one of the best why choose sword-crossing romances I have ever read. And I'm just going to naturally compare Emily to that. And that's what I think is really unfair with my experience of Burning Daylight, and it's unfair to Emily. I just could not stop comparing this to other things. I'm comparing it to the source material that's being retold, and I think Shakespeare's is more compelling because it is tragedy and it has real weight and it makes you cry. There were no tears to this. I'm comparing it to Emily's other books, and I also think while it's better than some, it's not as good as others. You know, this isn't cracking my Emily McIntire top, but it is also absolutely definitely not the worst book Emily McIntire has ever written. And even then, Emily McIntire's worst book, still going to be minimum 3 out of 5 for me. That woman is incapable of writing a bad book. I'm an Emily McIntire stan. No one's allowed to say anything bad about Emily McIntire in my presence ever, because she is an angel and I love her. She has seen my content online and she has always reacted so nicely. I would do anything for that woman except lie. And so I'm going to be honest and say I didn't love this. I liked it, didn't love it. It was good, not great. It was fine. In fact, it was better than fine. It was good. And you guys might love it. You guys might think, God, yeah, that's brilliant. But I've just come off the back of reading a really, really brilliant 5-star book. And I have read Emily McIntire books that are 5-star books. And my desire on the sliding scale of Emily's Never After series to her Sugarlake series was that this would fall more towards the Never After end of the spectrum, and it definitely doesn't. This is more like her Sugarlake series. And so the one thing I want people to take from this video is, if you have not read Emily McIntire's Sugarlake series books before picking up this new set, I thoroughly recommend you do. You can get them nice and cheap here in the UK now. The Works stock the entire series set. Get them, read them before reading this, because you will be much better set up for what to expect. If you come into this book only having read her Never After series book, I think you're going to be thrown. I think you're going to be like, wow, this is not what I come to expect from an Emily McIntire romance, because you'll be expecting dark, okay? And this is not a dark romance at all. You know, the spice is vanilla. The spicy scenes are straightforward. I mean, they're good. They're good. There is a scene in a bathroom that I was a particularly big fan of, but there's nothing edgy to it. And I love it when Emily McIntire just lets her freak flag fly. That's when I think she is at her best. Let her be weird, let her be creative, let her get dark and dirty. That is where I see her truly shine, and I think she brings something really unique to narratives. So for me, this felt a little bit more rote, a little bit more by the by, which is fine. I understand authors wanting to do that, and because I'd read her Sugarlake series, I know that's where Emily started. And the Never After series was actually more of a departure from what she'd originally been trying out. You know, you get to that final Sugarlake series book and some kinky stuff happens, and I was like, oh, there we go. That's her finding a real rhythm. That is the little nibble of what's to come in Never After. This is more of a return to books 1 to 3 of the Sugarlake series, which, putting my hands up, they're not my favourite Emily McIntyres. I still think this is probably better than 1 or 2 of those, but it's not like her Never After series. I will, however, say I love the cover design. This has actually inspired me as well with the fact that Roman in this is an artist. I think I'm going to get some of my acrylic paint pens and I'm going to try and draw on this. I'm going to try and do edges to it just because I think the covers are so lovely. I wish this had edges to match, so I'm going to try and do that myself. So I can't tell you it's a bad book because I've been left inspired by it, and I definitely had a good time, just not a great time. And I really, really wanted that for me, but also for Emily. I wanted to be able to come on here and sing this book's praises and tell all of you that you needed to get it. It was 5 stars. For me, it isn't. For me, it wasn't. And hopefully it's kind of clear why at this point. I'm struggling to remember what I've mentioned in the recordings that have actually been made, what I shouted out into the ether that will never be heard by anyone before. I just hope all of my salient points actually get it into this video. I feel like we've had a solid start to the challenge. You know, I am keen to continue. I think I'm going to shift my focus onto some autumnal seasonal books just because the weather is turning now and it's getting darker and grayer, and I know at the very end of the month I'm going to want to be reading Halloween style books and dark high fantasy romances. So I have a couple of seasonal picks. So I think my next read, it's going to be a book One More Chapter sent me with a pun in the title to do with pumpkins. It's something like Let's Give 'em Pumpkin to Talk About. It has an orange cover. I know exactly what it looks like in my head. That's the book that I'm going to go find and is going to be my read for today. And then maybe I'll work my way through books like that and Cozy Girl Fall just before I start shifting into dark and edgy. Oh, wait, no, I can't do that. Today's is going to have to be a seasonal book because book number 4 of the challenge is going to be Alchemized, as a heads up, because I'll have a weekend to crack on and doing that in an entire day. That's coming, okay? Consider yourself warned. It won't be tomorrow's video, but the day after, Alchemized will be coming and I'm going to read it in an entire day. So yeah, there we go. You can kind of see where I'm at. Hopefully you're enjoying the series so far. If you've liked this video in any capacity, even if it has just given you a little bit of a different framing to go into reading this book with, then please give the video a like, give the channel a follow, and hopefully, you know, you can carry on this challenge with me, see how we go day to day. I'm really hoping that this next one is a 5-star. Let's manifest that for me, okay? Thank you so much for watching. I will see you later, alligators. Goodbye for now.